Call to order the meeting of City Council for January 14th, 2019. Dr. Hostetter, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Very happy to. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Remind those in attendance if you'd like to speak during the citizen comment period, there's a sign-in sheet in the back of the room by the door that you came through, and would welcome your signature to sign up to speak later on in the meeting. First item of business this evening is the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
I'll make the motion.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 4-0. Thank you. Number 3 are matters from council members. Does anyone have anything they'd like to share this evening?
I would just like to thank our City Public Works Department for last month. They worked very hard clearing our street of debris and tree debris and then the snowstorm. So thanks to all those folks that gave a lot of time and cleared our city for us.
Yeah, I'll echo that. Anything else? I would just give a few updates. We've been in communication with both Senator Hanger's office and Delegate Bell's office related to the charter change amendments that we had requested, and pleased to report that those are moving along, and those will be introduced, so appreciate their efforts. Let's see, met with Delegate Bell last week with Mr. Allen, who's enjoying a much-earned vacation this evening, and also just had a meeting with an update with the architects and city staff related to the Virginia Museum of Natural History. And that work, the architects have been secured by the museum board, and that work is ongoing and exciting. So appreciate staff's leadership in that regard. All right. First item of other business this evening is the resolution is to consider adopting a resolution authorizing the city manager and or mayor to receive real property interest on behalf of the city of Waynesboro for the calendar year 2019. Mr. Ham.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. This has become an annual exercise for our organization. In order for the city to accept real property interest, the council must act affirmatively to do so. Real property interests include easements, rights of way, and ownership interests. The required affirmative action has its origins in common law and prevents the owner of land from, shall we say, dumping land and property on the government to escape responsibilities and liabilities associated with ownership. The resolution presented for your consideration would authorize the mayor and the city manager to receive real property interests on behalf of the city for the calendar year 2019, alleviating the need to schedule each item for council's consideration. The most common benefit and application of this authority would be easements granted to the city related to recreational road, utility construction, and maintenance.
Great. Are there any questions, Mr. Ham? Is there a motion to adopt the resolution?
So moved.
Great. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you. 4-0. I'm so used to it. Number 5 is to receive a staff briefing from Deputy City Manager Jim Shaw regarding the collection of debris and response to the November 15th, 2018 ice storm. Mr. Shaw.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, I believe as you're abundantly aware, on November 15 of 2018, the city was struck with an ice storm that left the entire city virtually without power, and for some folks for several days. But at one point, no consumers of Virginia Dominion had electric power in the city of Waynesboro. And the outage was caused by extensive tree damage, both to transmission lines within the city, but also tree damage that affected transmission lines all the way out to the doomed substation north of the city. And the collective experience of the city staff, Mr. Kreiser, Mr. McReynolds, myself, Mr. Hamp, with 20, 25 years of experience each, we'd never seen quite as extensive damage. And we'd seen ice storms, we've seen heavy snowstorms, even the derecho several years ago, I think, were less damaging than we experienced during the ice storm. During the event and in the immediate aftermath, our responsibilities include clearing and opening roads, working in coordination with Virginia Dominion power crews to move tangled trees tangled in power lines, and ensuring the basic delivery of public safety services under the difficult circumstances. We also opened an emergency shelter at Kate Collins Middle School, and over the course of several days provided shelter to more than 20 individuals. I think the city was fortunate not to have experienced notable property damage, and most notably, or most importantly, loss of life or injury. And certainly some private properties were not so fortunate. We've seen homes and automobiles that were damaged. I believe the citizenry performed admirably, and I'm certainly proud of the manner in which the city employees responded and continue to respond. I think it was incredible that in the busy intersections at Rosser Avenue and Luda Witt, there were no signal lights, and during the most heavily trafficked periods, people conducted themselves safely and efficiently, kept things moving. We do plan and prepare for natural disasters, and however, when one occurs, we're left at the mercy of Mother Nature, and we have to respond accordingly. And as noted, tree damage from Avery was really the most exceptional damage that we've witnessed in recent memory. We began clearing trees from the public right-of-way almost immediately, and then commenced collecting debris from residents in a matter of weeks. We divide the city into 9 collection areas according to the same map that we use for leaf collection, and we're currently working in area 8 of 9. And while we've asked citizens to bring debris to the street, we know that that direction isn't always possible or followed. Some folks really would struggle to bring their debris to the street. So we do anticipate in having to do some alley collection. Of course, we collect trash on many of the alleys, so I think the alleys are clear, but we know we're going to have to work in the alleys. Work has slowed as crews have been diverted to other duties such as leaf collection, snow removal on a couple of occasions, and I&I work that has to be completed under consent order by certain deadlines. We've had a couple of large water leaks. If you've been on Main Street in the last several weeks, you've noticed it closed for a large water leak. Unfortunately, this time of year is also when we experience freezes that affect even main lines of the city. If all goes well, nonetheless, we would hope to be completed in 3 or 4 weeks. Leaf collection has also been hampered both by the diversion of manpower, but also by snowfalls that occur. And rather than picking up piles of leaves, we're picking up mats of leaves, and it just takes us longer to do that. So at any rate, we are currently in leaf collection area number 4. We will continue both of these endeavors until they're complete. Through the first January payroll, our cost of debris collection totaled nearly $125,000, of which a bit more than $80,000 is labor and more than $43,000 is in equipment cost. I would anticipate that the cost may be as high as $200,000 or $250,000 once all is said and done. The expenditures are spread across the Streets Division in the general fund as well as all of the enterprise funds, the stormwater fund, water and sewer funds, and the refuse collection funds. And once all the work is completed, we'll need to make a proper accounting for the cleanup efforts, and we will either inevitably have a reduction in the existing fund balance or a reduction in the current year budget, which would then affect fund balance moving into from FY19 to FY20. So certainly some of the expenditures are legitimately reimbursed by the Streets Division, which utilizes VDOT maintenance funds, but there will be a significant cost. Now, having said that, as we talk about fund balance policy, disaster relief is one of the reasons that a city has fund balance, so to be able to address these kinds of events. The Cape Collins shelter costs a bit more than $3,300, and then further, more than 500 qualifying households were able to take advantage of a food replacement program through the Department of Social Services. I think there certainly have been moments over the last 6 or 8 weeks where those of us in the administration have questioned, why did we take this on? And we've certainly had moments where we wondered if we didn't bite off more than we could chew. Nonetheless, our crews are hale and hearty, and they're going to pull us through. But I think, we return to the notion that, A, we had a certain responsibility to clear public right-of-ways, that we had a number of streets that were impassable, and as we moved that debris, we couldn't simply push it back onto private properties, and we have a number of trees that were in the public right-of-way that would be our responsibility to clear. So and then as well, we assumed that many of the residents would rely upon their knuckle boom service to pick up debris. I don't think we wanted to find ourselves in a situation where we were either quibbling with residents about whether a tree was in the right-of-way or on their property, or whether the volume of their debris exceeded their knuckle boom allotment or not. And I think also in our experience that we knew that some folks would otherwise perhaps neglect the debris, would not have the resources to deal with it, or that you would have many folks who through their own resources or private contractors would start to move debris. And again, in our experience, some of that debris ends up in places we have to clean it up anyway through illegal dumping. So we are committed, and I'm certainly, I think as we're getting close to sort of a post cleanup period, that it's a worthy conversation for the council to have as to whether this was the appropriate response, whether you would do it again. Again, in our 25 years experience, we've not seen anything like it. I'd like to think I could get through the rest of my career without another such event. But the nature of disasters are that you could go 20 years or you could go 20 days before you have another. So I do think there's some legitimate conversation. Through Gary Kreiser, the Director of Emergency Operations Center here in Waynesboro, we had evaluated opportunities for funding through disaster declarations or other programs, and there really just aren't those kinds of resources for an event like this. The process for making a disaster declaration is actually codified. It's explicit in the Virginia Code. And the locality can, either in the days preceding, the days during, or immediately following an event, make a local disaster declaration. And your hope is that then there would be a gubernatorial declaration and ultimately a federal declaration. The money for relief that comes to localities actually originates from FEMA and flows through the Virginia Department of Emergency Management. But there are fairly clear guidelines as to what the local responsibilities are in any case and how the money is distributed. And so you end up getting a portion of any disaster relief depending on the disaster expenditures in your own locality. And also, I think that what you find is that for winter events, FEMA has become much more restrictive in the way that they describe the eligible events. The city has been a recipient. In our experience, we've been the recipient of some recovery, FEMA recovery money, and they followed a snow event, but it was a snow event of record. In other words, it was the greatest snow event that the city had experienced. And we've also been recipient of mitigation money following disasters. But you really have to look at what is qualifying. And so in this event, for instance, you didn't have folks that were displaced from their homes. You didn't have extensive public or private property damage that couldn't be satisfied by private insurers. You didn't have extensive disruption to public facilities, roads, water, sewer, or disruption to local commerce and business. And so while it's extensive and it's expensive, it really doesn't rise to the same level of disasters that we hear about, and unfortunately we've heard frequently about in the last year or so in North Carolina and California and other places. But nonetheless, I would like to satisfy the council that these are things that we're aware of. We're familiar with the programs. We've been, under Mr. Kreiser's guidance, the recipient of disaster aid, either for recovery or mitigation, but this one, unfortunately, doesn't qualify.
Any questions, Mr. Shaw? So the gist, it's $250,000.
I think it's going to be $250,000. I really do. And I think, again, some of that legitimately will be charged against the VDOT maintenance funds, but some of it will be either a hit to fund balance as it sits or fund balance rolling forward into the next fiscal year.
Okay, great, thank you. Well, I think it's certainly, I would just add that it's important that we share the good news and the not so good news so that everybody has an appreciation for the variety of work that the city sort of has to undertake and the real cost of doing so. So appreciate that update, Mr. Shaw.
Yes, sir.
Number 6 is to consider approving a request by the Department of Parks and Recreation to serve beer in accordance with applicable ABC regulations in association with the Mad Anthony Run, February 23rd in Collier Springs Park. Speaking of a good time, Mr. Hamp.
I think this is self-explanatory. The city's code requires that the council authorize the sale or service of beverage alcohol on public property.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions?
I've just got 2 quick comments. Number one, a sort of friendly amendment. Parks and Rec actually put on 5 runs last year, not 4 runs, an additional run. And so they put on 5 every year now. And the second thing is that I've had the pleasure of running in the Mud Run for a number of years, and I encourage all of you to take part in it. It's good fun. Even if it's in February. And
Cold and muddy,
I challenge my city council mates to join me out there this year.
Oh,
and we'll see if we can all enjoy a good muddy run and look forward to it.
That sounds great. All right, you won. There we go. I'm in and I'm out. Well, great. So, so with that friendly amendment, would you like to make that in form of a motion?
I certainly would.
Great. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 4-0. Number 7 is 7A is to consider introducing an ordinance appropriating a portion of the refuse fund retained earnings in the amount of $52,000 to the refuse fund for an evaluation of the solid waste and recycling system. Mr. Shaw.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, the city provides voluntary curbside solid waste collection service to approximately 8,000 residential customers and 220 businesses. The city also maintains a bulk waste collection program, the Knuckle Boom Truck, and a public convenience center for the collection of drop-off recyclable material. Through an interlocal agreement, the city delivers its solid waste to the Augusta County Regional Landfill managed by the Augusta County Service Authority. We also continue post-closure activities at the former landfill site off of North Winchester Avenue, hopefully soon to be Sunset Park. The city delivers its services with a staff of 13 employees using 3 Packer trucks and 2 Knuckle Boom trucks. The fiscal year 2019 refuse fund budget totals approximately $1.2 million. The Department of Public Works is interested in assessing the efficiency and effectiveness and reducing inefficiencies in its solid waste and recyclable material collection systems, assessing its current fee assessment and overall structure of solid waste revenues and expenses, and exploring potential opportunities in the current waste collections programs, protocols, and procedures. We would propose to pursue a study then of our solid waste collection system, and the activities of this work would include 1, a collections efficiency evaluation, 2, a rate study, and 3, an investigation into potential privatization measures. Essentially, through the collections evaluation portion or task, we would gather information regarding physical operations, current standards, ordinances, service policies, and the revenues and cost elements for each component of the city's collection and disposal systems, including the recycling center and solid waste management disposal. We would develop comparison metrics and identify areas for potential improvement through changes in business practice, policies, or technologies, such as automated collection systems, in-cab GPS, and work order response software. The rate study would attempt to determine the adequacy of current rates to cover all costs associated with providing services, and to ensure that the rate structure conforms to generally accepted principles of rate making, and ensures equity in the recovery of cost of service deliveries. And finally, an evaluation of privatization scenarios would evaluate hypothetical scenarios to privatize the city's existing waste collection program, based on information gathered in the first 2 tasks, and then as well by identifying communities that have recently outsourced and taking into consideration stakeholders, both staff and customers, and regional candidates for outsourcing services. And then finally, to perform a customer satisfaction survey. I think what we would expect to do in the privatization scenario study is more or less frame the context and frame the issues that a council would have to consider in privatization, rather than coming to an absolute declaration of whether we should or shouldn't privatize, but rather give you the information to begin that kind of an assessment. We have issued an RFP for these services, and we have selected a preferred vendor, SCS Engineers, to work with. We have a cost estimate, and this evening we're asking the council to appropriate a portion of the refuse fund retained earnings in the amount of $52,000 to be paired with $10,000 in the existing budget to complete this evaluation.
Any questions? No? Well, I would just add that I certainly I think it's important to examine opportunities for efficiency, to identify if those exist, and deal with some of the realities, and that, you know, from our recycling program, as valuable as it is a subsidized program presently, and so understanding the utilization and how to improve recycling programs and the like, I think is certainly appropriate for a community of our size. So I think it's certainly a worthwhile effort. So appreciate that this evening. So is there a motion to introduce the ordinance?
So moved.
Folks, we're just introducing the ordinance this evening. Okay, great, thank you. So ordinances introduced this evening will be brought forward at our next regular scheduled business meeting. All right, thank you. 7B is to consider introducing an ordinance appropriating a portion of the government facility maintenance reserve in the amount of $292,393 to the general fund for transfer to the capital projects fund, and appropriating funding from the VDOT revenue sharing agreement in the amount of $292,393 to the capital projects fund for engineering and construction expenses related to the A Street Bridge replacement project. Mr. Shaw.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, I believe you're well aware of this project that we propose a replacement of a 6-barrel culvert-type bridge on A Street. The bridge is a priority item in both the bridge CIP and the Stormwater Capital Improvements Program. The city applied for and has been granted revenue sharing funds. The revenue sharing funds require 50-50 match. The city's portion of the bridge replacement will be $292,393. VDOT will match those funds.
Okay. Any questions? Is there a motion to introduce the ordinance?
So moved.
Thank you. Item 7C is to consider introducing an ordinance appropriating a portion of the VDOT restricted reserve in the amount of $47,819 to the general fund for transfer to the Capital Projects Fund for design and engineering services for the Florence Avenue Bridge. Mr. Shaw.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, I know you're well aware of this bridge project. The bridge is being funded to some fair extent through federal highways funds. We've incurred additional expenses related to requirements of the Federal Highways Administration and design and bidding of the project. Some of those costs have already been incurred, and we expect with final bridge approval plans that we'll have to make some amendments to the plans. And these funds are simply to complete those requirements in the design and bidding of the bridge project. By way of update, I think the council is aware that the bridge was closed when a public works employee discovered a pothole on the bridge, and we had been inspecting the bridge on an annual basis. We had been given every indication that the bridge would need to be replaced, but we probably had several years for replacement. But within a matter of months, the discovery of the pothole prompted our consulting engineers to suggest that the bridge should be closed to vehicular traffic. We've designed a bridge replacement. We submitted those plans to the Virginia Department of Transportation in April of 2018. It was determined that federal highways monies would require an environmental impact statement be completed, which the department completed for us. And that there would be other levels of review of the plans. So as it stands, we've been giving somewhat of a moving target date for being able to bid the bridge project. My expectation is that the approval is imminent. Once bid, we will probably have a period of about 60 days to bid the project and get a contractor under contract, and then the replacement of the bridge itself will probably take about 8 or 9 months. I know it's frustrating for the council and for citizens, but we're beholden to the folks who will pay for the bridge.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions?
No.
Okay, is there a motion to introduce the ordinance?
I'll make the motion.
Great, thank you. Item 7D is to consider introducing an ordinance appropriating CDBG program income in the amount of $14,180 to the Capital Projects Fund for transfers to the CDBG restricted reserve account to be used for a future CDBG project. Mr. Shaw.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, several years ago, the city utilized community development block grant funds to do a housing rehabilitation project in the Arch and Market Avenue area. The way the program works is that if a qualifying homeowner is eligible for some sort of rehabilitation and in a couple of cases complete rebuild of a home, that there is a forgivable lien attached to the property, and that if the home is sold prior to the expiration of that lien, then the homeowner must pay back whatever portion of the lien is left through the proceeds of the sale of the home, and these are such proceeds. And so the money then can be returned to the city for eligible capital, for eligible CDBG projects.
Okay. Any questions? Is there a motion to introduce the ordinance?
I will make that motion.
Great, thank you. Item 7E is to consider introducing ordinance appropriating a portion of the unused funds in the planning department in the amount of $7,000 to the Capital Projects Fund to construct a secure enclosure for storage of trash receptacles for certain downtown restaurants. Mr. Hamp.
Mayor Short and members of council, numerous buildings in the downtown area do not have undeveloped space on which to put screened enclosures for their trash receptacles. This is particularly a problem with restaurants in the downtown that generate food waste. As more restaurants seek to locate in our downtown area, the number of trash cans has increased. And currently, the proposal that we seek appropriation for this evening would furnish a solution to 4 food establishments in our downtown area: the Heritage, Mr. Jameson's, Jake's, and the French Press. The challenge is that most of those entities, if you are familiar with them, have frontage on a sidewalk in the, to the front of their facility or establishment, and then front on a sidewalk in the rear, leaving no private space on which to locate trash receptacles. The city comes to this opportunity or challenge through the notion that in a private shopping center or private development, there is a landowner or a landlord who is responsible for furnishing trash services, lighting, parking, litter control, etc. In the downtown area, the city fulfills this responsibility, and we want to do so in a way that creates a hospitable, clean, healthy, and safe environment. And we feel like that this is an opportunity in which to improve in that regard. It's an issue that a number of staff members have thought about and reflected on and developed solutions for. What we would propose to do is establish a fenced area in which these 4 food establishments could locate their trash receptacles, and then the city would furnish regular trash collection to that single point. The staff member who has developed this solution has worked with the owners or operators of the 4 establishments, and they have indicated that they will voluntarily participate, and we feel like that this will improve service for them and improve service and environment in our downtown area generally. The location would be on public property, about a third of the way down Lumos Lane.
Which side of
South side.
south side?
If you're familiar with Lumos Lane, there is an odd single parking stall that's sort of corned off, has a curb, and it's a stall that is unto itself and somewhat misplaced in the design of the lane, and we've identified that as at least the initial place for this endeavor. We would treat it as allowing that this could be wildly successful, and at some point we may want to improve the aesthetic, or it might not be as successful as we hope, and we want to regroup. But a vinyl fence installed there gives us the flexibility to kind of recover if things don't go as well as we anticipate.
Will there be gates on it so that it doesn't become a public landfill just for those restaurants?
I anticipate that we would gate it. Now, excuse me, I don't think we'll lock it, and so there is inherent some risk that non-participants will rely on it, but we'll do our best to sort of monitor and enforce. It's, in some cases, surprising how one can spend some time and associate trash with different occupants of the downtown area. So in trying to solve this problem, we're kind of familiar with who's generating what and what their bags look like and how it works.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions? Is there a motion to introduce the ordinance?
I'll
So
make the motion.
Thank you. 7F is to consider introducing an ordinance appropriating a portion of the school renovation reserve in the amount of $576,040 to the general fund for the debt service payment of the 2018 bonds. Mr. Shaw.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, this is fairly self-explanatory, but I would note a couple of things, that in fiscal year 19, we'll only have one debt payment on the 2018 bonds, and I believe this is an interest-only payment, so that in future fiscal years, we'll simply budget the payment, and it'll be a bit more than twice this amount. And then the other thing that I might note is that through 2 separate tax rate increases, the city council directed that a portion of those increases be set aside specifically for the debt service on the Waynesboro High School renovation project. So we have a reserve set up, and we'll draw from that reserve to make this payment and future payments.
That's great. Thank you. Any questions? Is there a motion to introduce the ordinance?
So moved.
Thank you. 7G is to consider appropriating a portion of the government facility maintenance reserve in the amount of $30,748 to the general fund for tree cleanup at Ridgeview Park. Mr. Hamp.
So, Mayor Short and members of council, tree cleanup is a bit of a misnomer here. This is actually purchase services professional arborists who will either remove or prune trees that were damaged during the ice storm. And what the staff have done is an assessment of what they call high-risk areas. So while most of the work occurs in Ridgeview Park, and while if you consider that people can walk a dog or play Frisbee, basically enjoy the entirety of the property, high-risk areas are areas such as parking lots, entrances, dugouts, playgrounds, shelters, where people tend to congregate and remain for some time to enjoy the park. And so this is professional services that have been competitively quoted that involve the removal or pruning of trees that were damaged and now pose a new risk either to human safety or to the overall health of the tree in the park.
Did any of the other parks receive damage?
They did, but I think we're focusing at this point on the most populated and most heavily used parks. So in talking to the director, you could go, for example, and do an assessment in the Frisbee golf area of Coiner Springs. We've not done that, figuring that in the wintertime, they're less likely to do that, but less likely to play Frisbee golf. So I imagine that as we work through over time, we'll identify more. What we focused on now is those areas in Ridgeview Park and North Park that are most frequently used.
But they're safe to
Yes,
go to, okay.
yes.
Because I think staff, as I recall, had done some level of pruning.
That's correct. I think originally, as we began to conceive of this, I may have shared that this was a debris collection and chipping and mulching. That's not the case. The staff have collected all of the debris that they could either reach or that was on the ground, and this is now service that requires the work of a trained arborist to do proper pruning and removal.
Great. Any other additional questions? Is there a motion to introduce the ordinance?
So moved.
Okay, thank you. 7H is to consider introducing an ordinance appropriating a portion of the government facilities maintenance reserve in the amount of $13,000 to the general fund for the replacement of a retaining wall, steps, and walkway at the Plum House. Mr. Hamp.
So we had included in the fiscal year 2019 operating budget money for about half of this project and had hoped to secure grant funding or donation to complement the city's appropriation. That grant opportunity and donation will not be realized, and so the stairs and the wall at the Plum House are the two problems, and it doesn't make sense and isn't practical to undertake one without the other. So would be our recommendation that we pursue the project and now appropriate sufficient funds to do both the steps and the wall.
Any questions?
Is there a time frame in mind for this at this point, or are we still too far out?
Dr. Hostetter, I would, I'm speaking not from absolute recollection, but I think if appropriated, we would work with a vendor to kind of accomplish this work as weather would allow in advance of the weather breaking for bigger projects. I think this is viewed as kind of a small off-season project that we might be able to attract beneficial pricing for.
Great. Other questions? I know I'm excited about it because it's I think it sets the stage for actually being able to enter through the front door of the Plum House in a meaningful way and restore that important piece of property here in the city. Is there a motion to introduce the ordinance?
I'll make it.
Great, thank you. All right. Number 8 is communication correspondence. Mr. Hamp.
I do not have anything this evening, sir.
Number 9 is the citizen comment period.
Mr. David Geiger.
Mr. Geiger, if you wouldn't mind stating your name and address for the record, and then the little stoplight here is going to come on. Green is go, yellow is slow down, and red is stop.
Okay.
Thank you.
David Geiger, 701 Locust Avenue. As a member of the Historical Commission and a former chairman, I was very happy to see this appropriation for Plum House work, and would recommend and hope that City Council looks favorably on that at the next meeting. It's been needed for a few years, and the front entrance of the Plum House is unusable, as we all know. So we thank you for taking these steps. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else?
No, sir.
Okay. Great. Number 10 is we have a closed session.
Mr. Mayor, I move to recess into closed meeting in order to consult legal counsel regarding a specific legal matter requiring provisions of legal advice by our attorney, as authorized by Section 2.3.3711, Paragraph A, Section 7 of the Code of Virginia. The subject matter of this meeting is pending litigation involving Waynesboro Village and a threatened litigation by a citizen relating to an alleged violation of their Second Amendment rights.
Okay, this motion requires a roll call vote.
Mayor Short,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Henderson,
Aye.
Councilwoman Anderson,
Aye.
Councilman Hofstadter.
Aye.
Closed session.
It's really necessary.
Motion to reconvene.
Mr. Mayor, with respect to the just called closed session, and to the best of each member's knowledge, Section I, only public business matter lawfully exempt from open meeting requirements under the Freedom of Information Act, and 2, only such public business matters as were justified in the motion by which closed meeting was convened were heard, discussed, or considered in the meeting with council.
Great. That's requires a roll call vote.
Mayor Short.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Henderson.
Aye.
Councilwoman Anderson.
Aye.
Councilman Hofstadter.
Aye.
Back in session. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Great. We are adjourned. Thank you.